Hey guys, and recently, with the Switch 2 being announced, there has been a lot of discussion about people thinking that Nintendo kind of lost their touch because the Switch 2 is very derivative of the Switch 1, at least superficially, and that has kind of brought up this discussion once again about people thinking that Nintendo lacks the soul or creativity that they once had, and this is a sentiment that I've seen kind of thrown around throughout most of the Switch era at different points in time, but I wanted to discuss how this is kind of misleading, and why that really isn't the case, because Nintendo really never lost the soul or creativity that they had during other eras like the Wii, GameCube, and Wii U era even. So yeah, before we get started, I wanted to mention that I have a goal to hit 30,000 subscribers before the Switch 2 launches, so if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing, and if I hit that goal, I will give away a copy of the new Mario Kart game. But yeah, this sentiment really isn't true, but I can understand where some people are coming from when they do think that Nintendo is less creative or has less soul than they once did. Because there are like a lot of things that are kind of contributing to that sentiment. Like the fact that the UI of the Switch is very boring and lackluster compared to the Wii U and 3DS. It doesn't have themes, it lacks a lot of the features that it did on the Wii U. It is just a very simple menu. And it really only serves the purpose of just going through your games and opening up a game, or going onto the eShop, or checking news, doing very basic things like that. So I could see why people are kind of coming from it at that angle. And then there's also the fact that Nintendo, kind of throughout the Switch era, has been releasing a lot of low-effort, high-priced remasters and ports, like Skyward Sword HD, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, and other ones like that. Between Wii, 3DS, and Wii U ports, there have been like a lot of them that have been $60, not worth the price, and kind of low effort. But then there's also things like the fix-it-later approach, where Nintendo adds content to games later, like for games like Mario Tennis, Golf, Mario Strikers, or Nintendo Switch Sports. And then there's the recent thing about the Switch 2 looking very derivative compared to the Switch 1. But the thing is with this, these are just very specific examples and don't really represent Nintendo as a whole. Like with things like the overpriced remasters, that's really a separate issue. That's something that really every company does, and Nintendo isn't even the most egregious example of it. And for things like the fix-it-later approach, once again, that is just something that they do that doesn't really have to do with the creativity or, like, I guess, quality of their games, at least in some cases. Maybe not for the case of Mario Strikers or Nintendo Switch Sports, but for the most part, that isn't really indicative of like the quality of most of their games. But yeah, the truth is that their creativity has really never gone away, as their games are mostly still very creative, and I'd even argue that they're more creative than they were during the Wii U and 3DS era on average. The Mario franchise is the most creative it's been in 15 years. We have games like Wonder being the most creative 2D Mario game ever, and really being innovative in a visual sense. I guess it's not super innovative when it comes to like the gameplay itself, but the gameplay is still very good, and does have a lot of cool ideas, like the Wonder effects. And then the Mario RPGs are flourishing once again. We have the remakes. I know those are remakes, and I'll get into my point on remakes in a little bit, but Mario & Luigi Brothership is one of the most interesting and creative Mario & Luigi games. It takes a lot of risks. Some risks that some people don't even like the fact that Luigi isn't like fully controllable this time, which I'm kind of mixed on, but I don't think it's inherently a bad thing. But then there's also some really cool things that Brothership did, like the fact that there's like different islands you can travel to, and different things to find, and the whole structure of the game is really interesting. And then there's also things like the 3D Mario games pushing boundaries, like Odyssey and Bowser's Fury. Odyssey finally bringing back the sandbox Mario formula and actually doing something interesting with it, kind of having a Banjo-Kazooie-esque approach of getting like a lot of collectibles and kind of scattered throughout a world, and Bowser's Fury having a large open world-esque area where you go around to different islands, getting the shines and everything. I think it's a really cool idea. And then Mario Party is finally doing something new with its old formula. Sure, it's an old formula, but they are adding some new interesting gimmicks to it, like the Jamboree Buddies, or various board gimmicks that are pretty interesting, and is actually doing something interesting without overhauling the formula. So, I feel like the Mario franchise specifically has been doing much better than it did before the Switch era. Like, I feel like the Switch era definitely helped the Mario franchise, and it's definitely been doing a lot better recently. And then another thing kind of connected to the Mario franchise, but WarioWare is also active again. It's also coming up with a lot of new ideas, like Get It Together, or it's also building off of older formulas and doing something new with them, like WarioWare Move It, kind of like building off of Smooth Move's formula. And then with other franchises, Zelda is also innovating as well with Echoes of Wisdom's Echo mechanic. I'm not the biggest fan of Echoes of Wisdom, but it's a pretty good game, and I think its Echo mechanic is really cool. And then Tears of the Kingdom, which is a game that I love, has a handful of really weird and interesting mechanics, like Ultra Hand and Fuse, and then also did a really cool gameplay loop with the depths, where you have to get the Zonaite, to kind of power everything, and you kind of go back and forth, and then also up to the Sky Islands. I know Tears of the Kingdom does seem very derivative of Breath of the Wild, but its gameplay mechanics actually kind of separate it from Breath of the Wild a decent amount, which is kind of why I'm making this point here. Tears of the Kingdom still does feel very creative and very Nintendo-esque in the way that you think a Zelda game would, or a new Zelda game would, so I don't really think that's an example of, like, Zelda being soulless or too derivative at all. And then things like Pikmin are also doing really interesting things as well. Like, Pikmin 4 basically combines everything that made the previous Pikmin games great, while also adding a lot of new elements like Ochi, the new camera angle, an upgrade system, and a lot of verticality and wide open areas with each of the levels. And it basically created the ultimate Pikmin game. And then even some games outside of EPD or EPD's co-development are also very creative as well, like Kirby and the Forgotten Land, all of the Xenoblade games on the Switch, especially 3. 2 has a lot of creative ideas as well. And then Fire Emblem with 3 houses, that's also like a really creative idea, one of the most creative and interesting Fire Emblem games. So it seems like most games during the Switch era, most Nintendo published games, are doing something very interesting and are either building off of an old formula and doing something fresh with it, or doing something completely new and original that is actually really interesting and really fun. And even remakes are being handled with care and are actually taking some creative risks as well. And even though it may seem like a remake is like the least creative thing you could ever do, because it's literally just kind of making something again, it's literally just an idea that already existed. Like, I think Nintendo is even doing some interesting things with their remakes and kind of bringing some fresh air and some, like, new life into their old games in, like, a lot of ways. Like, Link's Awakening has, like, a really cool toy-like art style, and I love that they used it in Echoes of Wisdom as well, and Link's Awakening is one of my favorite games of all time, so I think that was just a really cool way of handling it. Then Thousand Year Door, my absolute favorite game of all time, fully overhauls the original style and makes everything much more lively and expressive. It creates a whole, like, living and breathing world that looks like a diorama or a pop-up book. And a lot of these older character designs have, like, new expressions and new sprites, And they really kind of did a lot of interesting things here. Even like the new content in the Thousand Year Door remake is really interesting and creative. Like a Waka as a boss is just really cool. And also the music in the Thousand Year Door remake is really cool and really creative as well, since there's a lot of unique and original themes here. And then we have a lot of the dormant series that Nintendo has been bringing back and kind of adding some new ideas into them, like Metroid Dread. It feels like basically the definitive 2D Metroid game, like the best movement out of all the 2D Metroid games in my opinion, and does quite a lot with its world, and like a lot of the background and areas are really interesting, and like a lot of the moves that they added to the game are really fun as well. Then we have Emio, which is really cool, and it's like a really cool kind of revival of Famicom Detective Club after like the remake from a few years ago. And it really feels like Sakamoto's passion project, since there seems to be a lot of care into both the visuals and the story here. Like, the story is amazing, and I definitely recommend Emio. It's one of the most underrated Switch games, I'd say. And then New Pokemon Snap also that's like the one single Pokemon thing. Actually, I'll give some credit to Legends Arceus as well. That was interesting, but and I enjoyed that, but I feel like it needed a little more polish. But New Pokemon Snap was definitely a standout example for Pokemon, as it visually looked stunning for the Switch, and it was also just really fun and creative and had like a lot of interesting areas as well, and utilized quite a lot of Pokemon. It was just a great idea to see brought back. So it just seems like Nintendo has like cared a lot about these like dormant franchises and everything. And it really seems like they do have as much, if not more, care than they did like during other eras. That even outside of regular games, they have been doing a lot of creative ideas that have charm and personality as well. Like Nintendo Labo. Like, I know it's like overpriced cardboard, but at the same time, it still is cool what they did with it. They did do something like pretty cool where you could actually like make your own custom things out of like cardboard or whatever you want. And it still is a cool idea, even though it didn't really take off. I really like the Labo VR thing specifically. I think it was cool how they actually went and updated certain games like Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, and Smash Ultimate and Captain Toad that have like VR modes. I thought that was pretty interesting. And then Game Builder Garage, a game that I have covered quite a lot on this channel, and do hopefully weekly videos about it, showcasing people's games, is a really cool, like, kind of fun little game development thing. And I think it's, like, even though it's very limited and has some issues, I think it still is a really cool little way to, like, learn how to make games. Like, it is very accessible and very easy to make games in Game Builder Garage, and some people have made some very impressive things in Game Builder Garage. Like, recently, I was playing this, like, roguelike dungeon crawler, like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon-esque game, and that was really impressive. Had some cool pixel art. It actually had randomly generated areas, and was all contained within a single game. Like, because some games have to take up, like, multiple game slots, but this one only took up a single game. So people can do some really interesting things within the limitations of Game Builder Garage. And I've seen some people say that, like, Game Builder Garage looks kind of soulless compared to, like, other past things that Nintendo did. But honestly, I think it's just as interesting as a lot of other things. If you have, like, the Nodon, a lot of those cool little models, and, like, the little characters, I think it has a lot of personality in it. So it's still pretty interesting. And it was also developed by the part of EPD that, like, a lot of, I think it was Nintendo EPD 4 that also developed Nintendo Labo. Then also some of the people involved with EPD 4 also worked on, like, a lot of other, like, past, like, really creative and experimental things for Nintendo. Like the Mario Artist series that was on the Nintendo 64 DD. Like, that is what EPD4 is kind of like a spiritual successor of. It's like a lot of that, like, really experimental Nintendo 64 DD era-esque stuff. Like, they even developed that playtest thing. And that's another thing. The playtest they did recently also looks really interesting. I know people are saying it's copying Minecraft, and it looks a lot like Minecraft, but it really has like a completely different premise from Minecraft. It really, the only similarity to Minecraft, from what I've seen from the leaked footage, is the fact that there's blocks that you can place. That really seems to be about it. There seems to be a lot of differences and a lot of creative ideas with that. And then another thing is Ring Fit Adventure. Ring Fit Adventure is also really interesting as well, as it's like a fitness RPG. It's like almost like an actual interesting take on like Wii Fit. I know Wii Fit is an interesting idea and was fairly successful. Actually, I would say it's very successful, honestly, because I see like the Wii balance board in copies of Wii Fit like on shelves of every game store, like 50 copies of it. I would say it's pretty successful, but Ring Fit Adventure, I would say, actually has more interesting ideas than Wii Fit did, and actually brings that concept into like a more kind of interesting idea here. And then Nintendo Alarmo, a very recent idea, is also like an interesting thing as well. Sure, it's an overpriced alarm clock, but I still think it's pretty interesting. It still looks very Nintendo-esque. It still has a lot of that Nintendo-esque identity that you would expect. And then even the Nintendo Switch 2's mouse mechanic seems to be an idea that will be used in a lot of creative ways, and I think is also an inherently creative idea. So no, Nintendo never lost their touch. Despite the fact that the Switch's UI is soulless, and sometimes they make some very weird and like anti-consumer business decisions, like NSO under-delivering or games lacking content, the games are what matters most, and they've really never lost their touch in terms of delivering some creative and interesting games. So I think it's very misleading to spread around the fact that Nintendo lost their touch, or even worse, that Nintendo has gotten worse after Iwata's passing. That is extremely disrespectful to kind of mention that. Like, I think that really shouldn't be used as like a reason, even if Nintendo was less creative nowadays. I think that is really disrespectful, and I don't know why people were kind of using that as a point. But yeah. So anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and make sure to check out my Discord server and Blue Sky if you want to. Stay perky!